The big business of small loans. A major disruptor over the past several years, the buy now, pay later industry, has challenged stereotypes and defied expectations and is here to stay. By Chris Sheedy. This article in 1, 2, 3. Afterpay's business model is centered on the importance of consumer protection. A Roy Morgan report says Australians under the age of 35 make up almost 56% of the buy now, pay later users, and those over 50 make up just 14.2%. Credit card debt today is down to $7 billion from $8 billion in 2007, says the Roy Morgan report. For the buy now, pay later industry, the past year can be likened to a wild roller coaster ride, and no one has felt the highs and the lows as sharply as market leader Afterpay Holdings, known as Afterpay. 3 years from its listing in May 2016, the future looked bright for Afterpay. Its stock was trading at $25.70, and its market capitalisation has risen from $165 million to just over $6 billion Australian dollars. Then, in June 2019, when Visa announced it was entering the instalment payment solutions arena, some began to predict the death of Afterpay and other fast-growing but still young buy now, pay later brands. That day, the value of Afterpay stock dropped 15% in 30 minutes, and far worse was yet to come. During the COVID-19 market panic in March 2020, in a single session, Afterpay lost $1.47 billion of market value, or 33%, amid fears of bad debt exposure caused by job losses and widespread economic downturns. Having traded at over $40 in mid-February, shares were languishing at less than $9 in March. The share price then soared back to almost $40 in May, when Chinese tech giant Tencent Holdings Limited, owner of communications, social media and payment system WeChat, purchased a $300 million stake in Afterpay. Quote, "If a customer can't pay the bill, we lose the 3% or 4% we would have made from the sale. We still have to pay the merchant, plus we lose a customer. Clearly, the entire business model is built around getting customers paying on time and making sure the right customers are using our product." End quote. Compare that to the credit card model, which, like it or not, relies on customers being permanently in debt. If credit card customers pay off their debt in full, the business makes no revenue. That industry requires heavy regulation around consumer protections because it benefits partly from customers being in debt, as well as revenue from merchant fees. Many have argued that buy now, pay later operators should face similar stringent oversight. Up until now, the industry has not had to face such regulation, even after a Senate hearing into the industry in early 2019. Quote, "The industry is listening and responding as the regulatory landscape evolves," says Diane Tate, CEO of the Australian Finance Industry Association, which represents more than 100 providers of consumer, commercial and wholesale finance, and which has developed its own code of practice. In the Australian Finance Industry Association's Buy Now Pay Later Code of Practice, there are many instances where the standards go above and beyond the law. According to a November 2018 report from the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, ASIC, titled Review of Buy Now Pay Later Arrangements, the number of consumers who use at least one Buy Now Pay Later arrangement increased from 400,000 in 2015 to 2016 to more than 2 million in 2017 to 2018. Today, according to AFIA, approximately 30% of Australian adults, or about 5.8 million customers, are using Buy Now Pay Later services. Up to 10% of all online sales now go through a Buy Now Pay Later provider. A Roy Morgan report says Australians under the age of 35 make up almost 56% of Buy Now Pay Later users, and those over 50 make up just 14.2%. According to the Reserve Bank of Australia, in the 12 months to January 2019, the number of Australian credit and charge card accounts dropped from 16.71 million to 15.89 million. Credit card debt today, the Roy Morgan report suggests, is down to $7 billion from $8 billion in 2007. Significantly, 86% of Buy Now Pay Later users from the past 12 months plan to use a Buy Now Pay Later arrangement again, according to ASIC. On the downside, however, Buy Now Pay Later arrangements can create some risks for consumers if they take on debt that they may have difficulty paying back, the ASIC report says. In the wrong hands, of course, any service that results in any debt can be a negative. Jared Brody, CEO of the Consumer Action Law Centre, says that while the buy now, pay later industry has grown substantially over the past 12 months, consumer protections have not. He says those who contact the Consumer Action Law Centre's National Debt Helpline often have buy now, pay later debt on top of several other debts such as credit cards, personal loans, payday loans, and utility debts. Quote, "There is no logical reason that people would not benefit from the protections that apply for other types of loans," Brody says. "I'm not saying these loans shouldn't be available. People should have choices, and for many people, they work really well. But the providers should be required to abide by the same standards as other lenders." End quote. Brody has also seen cases of people prioritizing payments to buy now, pay later providers over payments to providers of essentials such as rent, electricity, and water. They do this, he says, because they fear being kicked off the buy now, pay later platform. Dr. Paul Harrison, Deakin University's director of the Centre for Employee and Consumer Wellbeing, says the industry is still under consideration for stricter regulation. Indeed, ASIC declined to be interviewed for this story, saying, quote, "We are still looking into the buy now, pay later sector and hope to have more to say about it in the coming 2 to 3 months." End quote. However, if there is regulation of the industry, it shouldn't be assumed that current legislation for credit providers would do the job, Harrison says. Quote, "There is a bit of confusion about how to approach this," says Harrison, who gave advice during the Senate hearing. People ask, how do we change current credit legislation to account for buy now, pay later? Instead, we need to think about it differently. We need to start with the effects of this type of product on consumers, particularly vulnerable consumers, and work back from there to figure out whether and how we need to regulate it." End quote. Interestingly, Tate agrees. Quote, "The current regulation of financial services and technology is becoming increasingly complex," she says. "We need the right regulatory settings to properly regulate the different fintech product and service offerings. A one-size-fits-all approach is increasingly not appropriate in traditional financial services, let alone tech products and services." End quote.